Good. Good. So I sat on my back porch and I looked over the lectionary readings for today, which I didn't use. But anyway, as I was sitting there, the birds sang, they chirped, they cheeped, they peeped, they called, and they squawked, calling to each other in their myriad of voices as night approached. The rays of the setting sun still danced in the bald cypress in our backyard. And soon the sun would slide down skies painted lavender, cantaloupe, and flaming orange at the very bottom. The giant sunflowers drooped their heads in preparation for the bees' meal the next day. Even the ever-present hum of cars could not detract from the holy greenness of a soft summer night. For a few short moments, I felt God as she worked her nightly magic, spreading her largesse over my little part of the world. And then Monday morning, another nice thing happened. I met with a new friend I like to call my guardian angel. Edward worshiped with us once, and he sometimes will come on Zoom. So Edward studied at the Catholic seminary for many years, both in the States and then at Rome, before marrying and becoming an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. And Edward developed a format for me to publicize my book, The Cost of Sainthood, through doing YouTube lectures, which I just began. Edward is also a mystic and a theologian. And although he's over 80, he spends his days spreading the good news in every way that he can think of by encouraging others to do the same. I am blessed to be one of his projects, one of his many projects. And if you read my book, you know that I differentiate between those the institution regards as being holy and those who demonstrate their holiness by behaving decently in a shockingly indecent world, to borrow a quote from Kurt Vonnegut. And believe it or not, the former often do not behave decently, despite the presence of their halos. So Edward and I spoke about how people become holy during our meeting. I told him that I can't believe that God chooses people to be saints any more than God chooses people to be sinners. That would make God into a puppeteer. Instead, I said, God pours out divine grace equally to everyone, pressed down and overflowing into everyone's lap. And it's up to each one of us to make use of that grace as we try to make our part of the world a better place. Those who choose to actively utilize grace to its greatest extent are probably those that we regard as saints. Edward agreed with everything I said except for one thing. He said that it is a mistake to regard grace as a package delivered by God, because that makes God into like the Amazon delivery person. Instead, he said, grace is actually God, the divine self, the actual Holy Spirit who is being poured right into our laps. And perhaps I shouldn't have felt shocked, but I sort of did. Guess I didn't have enough imagination to think of God living right there on my lap, that up close and personal, despite the experience I had the night before. So all of us have had different ideas and experiences of and about God, all variations on the same theme. And I'm sure it's true of everyone in this parish, and I'm sure it's true of everyone in institutional parishes and everyone in any religious denomination throughout the world. So who God is, what God does, and how God plays out in the world, I'm sure you would agree with me, is surely a mystery. We could debate who God is until the cows come home. Creeds and dogma and doctrine just hint at the majesty and identity of God. And God knows that the ancients tried to parse out the identity of God in the 4th century to the point of war and the massacre of those that the Orthodox regard as heretics. Even as Augustine wrote simultaneously that if we think we have defined God, we've defined something else. Because actions, as my late mother used to say, always speak louder than words. Anybody else get that? Steady that. Those preaching pogroms and crusades against the poor and favoring deportations and the starvation of the innocent flunk the holy test, despite what appears to be outward piety. But there are other useful questions, some personal and some global. Who is God to you and for you? How does your understanding of God play out in your life and the life of others? Does the idea of God differ according to geography, grace, class, race, sex, and other characteristics you might want to plug in there? Do we experience God's blessings differently? Do we respond to God differently? Does God act differently towards people in those classes, choosing some, rejecting others, rewarding some, punishing others, declaring some blessed and some cursed? Does God favor nations? Is God the arm of any government? What does it mean for a person or a nation to take the holy name of God in vain and use it as a weapon? These questions would take another couple of hours to discuss, so we're not going to discuss it here. But if you have some extra time during the week, you might want to think about it. But there have always been favorite images that people have used throughout the years. Many people of the world, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, have been comforted by the thought of God as the liberator described in Exodus. Others have perceived God as a mother hen, her wings outstretched to protect her chicks, or as a steady rock, or as an impenetrable fortress. My idea of God comes from the book of Revelation, not a pretty book by any standards because of its sanctification of violence towards those who are declared different. But for me, the only good part of the book is the description of what I regard as God. It's the woman crowned with the sun, the moon at her feet, groaning in active labor to give birth to a world where the lion can lie down with the lamb and human beings don't make war anymore. Or as our second reading says so well, perhaps God is the cleanup person who ties up all of the loose ends and puts everything in its place. While we might have a different understanding of the entity called God reached through prayer and spiritual practices, all of us know that we have seen and felt and known the actual presence of God. Our missionary sisters have seen God in the poorest parts of Africa and South America. Terry, a couple weeks ago, described seeing God in the eyes of a murderer asking for forgiveness. People that I met in El Salvador told me how their faith informed their resistance to a kleptocracy that disappeared and murdered real saints like Oscar Romero. Years ago, a coworker told me a story of someone living in an impoverished section of Philadelphia who invited her in to share a bowl of chili in a house whose first floor was devoid of any furniture except for a plank for a table and lawn chairs as chairs. God visited me in wood aerobics class this week when a woman named Barb, whom I see only during the summer, where we might have a cursory conversation or two, told me that she misses me when I don't show up for class. So no experience of God is less valuable or less meaningful or less divine. The good news is that God is anything but humdrum. She visits us daily and scatters her dewdrops of mercy upon us all, urging us to walk in her beneficent light. Those who recognize those bits and pieces as divine, practice kindness and extend mercy to everyone. So this weekend, we celebrated our nation's birthday. And the understanding of patriotism is as varied as our understanding of God, and the two often exist in a most unholy union. The prophet Micah long ago uncoupled the two. He wrote, or he preached, God shall judge between many peoples and shall arbitrate between strong nations far away. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not rise up against nations, neither shall they make war anymore, but they shall all sit under their own vines and under their own fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid, for the mouth of our God has spoken. For all the people, each walk in the name of their own God. And so, my friends, let us give thanks this weekend for the ability to sit under our own trees without fear, listening to the birds sing, watching the sun go down, and the sunflowers preparing for the morrow, knowing that our God is always with us. And let us allow others whom God regards as beloved to do the same as we share the love sent from above, from sea to shining sea.